The Heresy Accountabilibuddies Podcast is dedicated to all things Horus Heresy. This podcast delves into the grimdark universe where Primarchs clash, legions rise, and loyalties fracture faster than a Land Raider's track. But it's not just about the lore of the Horus Heresy. The Accountabilibuddies also explore the gaming side of things, from painting and modeling tips to product reviews and ideas to help you in your hobby. So, whether you're a seasoned Forge World veteran or a fresh-faced scout, this podcast is your Vox channel to the galaxy. Expect discussions on lore, modeling, gaming, and maybe even the shenanigans that your hosts somehow seem to find their way into. Remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there are only two things you can count on: heresy and your trusty Accountabilibuddies.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 86 of the Heresy Accountabilibuddies Podcast. I am Duncan, one of your glorious hosts. Tonight, I'm joined by my friends
Dan,
Jack,
and John.
And we got an episode set up for you guys tonight. But before we go any further, first, a word from the sponsors of the cast, who we greatly appreciate.
Do you love resin bases? Then go to our sponsor, Elric Hobbies, for all of your basing and basing accessory needs. Use code HERESYABB at checkout for a discount. Legendary Monument Hobbies. Monument Hobbies is a one-stop shop for all of your painting needs. Use code HERESYABB at checkout for a 5% discount on your purchase. Pop Goes the Monkey. Find maker of third-party accessory bits of arms, legs, backpacks, and more, where you can get 10% off your first order over $125 with code HERESYABB at checkout.
And following that, we also want to shout out our patrons. Thank you, each and every single one of you, for everything you do in supporting the cast. We really, truly do appreciate each one of you individually. Now, the preliminaries out of the way. This has been kind of a busy week for Heresy in some ways since our last recording. We had our usual Wednesday recording, or not recording, I should say, Wednesday hobby night. We had a fairly nice turnout. I think we had 12 or 15 people show up. And John was kind enough to get the pictures put up for what people had sent him that they had worked on. It has been kind of turning into a bit of a hangout evening rather than as much of a workout evening for everybody. But it has been fun, and it continues to be fun, and we are going to continue doing this. My hobby for the week, I'll go ahead and start. I put gold down on the World Eaters, specifically the Rampagers. I put golds on their shoulder pads, their belt buckles, and the trim on them. I have not finished all of them yet. I think about the 15 of the 30 are done. I did work on them some more the rest of the week, but I will get them finished hopefully next hobby chat. We'll see. I also put gold down on my champion that I'm going to be using. And yesterday, I actually was able to pre-order the latest of the Heresy maps from the Sanctum Imperialis that we had discussed on last week's episode. I was able to get absolute confirmation it is a brand new map, looked at all of the other ones I have, and able to confirm that it is not one of those. So, the Heresy map collection will be up to 7 as of this release, and I will have all 7 of them. What I will end up doing when they finally put them all done, or have done all of the releases they're going to do, is I'll put them all in glass and use them to decorate my hobby room. That's all I have done this week, so it's not been a lot. Jack, what have you done this hobby week?
and Dan, what have you done this hobby week?
Well, so I haven't been on for a few weeks because I went to England for a week and a half and skipped and wasn't available to record because times are weird. So we're going to talk about Warhammer World a little later. But the little bit of hobby time I have had in the interim, I've just been plugging away on assembling and magnetizing my armatures and weapons for them. For the night list, I've got pretty much 3 chassis all built and ready to go, and almost all the weapons that go with them built and magnetized and ready to pull out some more and start working on them. So, yeah, that's not much, but that's what I was able to get done.
Sounds
So,
good.
John.
Yeah, so since I missed last episode, I was stuck in Denver for work. Some mandatory fun was scheduled for our work hobby hangout, and so I realized I wasn't going to get a lot of hobbying done, so I didn't bother to take anything with me to the trip. But second I got home this week, I decided it was time to start cracking down on trying to get these Sentinel drivers done. So Lucas luckily had printed me off some legs that are going to stand up a little straighter than some of the other ones that I've been using for my Cobra militiamen. And so took everything he'd given me and some of the parts that I'd ordered before, and I managed to build all of the drivers and all of the gunners for the 24 Sentinels that I'm going to be using in part of my list. And then I got all those primed, zenithial highlighted, and then I airbrushed the base coat of contrast that I used for my base coat for my Cobra troopers. And I've got the dry brushing parts out for them to be worked on while we're working on the show tonight. And then while I was waiting for that contrast paint to dry, I found all of my old primed Marines that I'd been working on for a while, and I started zenithial highlighting them to kind of give the new spray booth kind of a workout to see if how much the white spray would overflow or if I could catch any overspray or anything like that. And I was on probably a couple hours easy, just trying to airbrush white over the black models, and I honestly cannot find any white overspray anywhere in the room. So I think the waterfall spray booth is definitely so far seems to be worth its money. And if I don't know if y'all can hear it right now, but I didn't turn it off after I finished painting, so it's actually not that loud compared to an air compressor or anything like that. So I think it's a decent addition to your hobby collection if you can get it. That's all the painting and things that I got done this week. On to news?
Yeah,
Actually,
I think at this point it's almost on the news.
All right, I got one more thing to come think of it to talk about. We missed it last time I was on, but GW announced that they were going to be figuring out a way to give End in the Death Volume 3 to the end consumer. And I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not happy with this, even though it didn't end up in my favor. What they ended up doing is, for some reason, they ended up with nearly 700 unsold books.
That's a lot.
Yeah. That's a lot considering how many people said that they ordered normally and got it canceled, or people that couldn't order like I couldn't online. And what they did was they divided that number between Warhammer World, the Games Workshop Citadel / Cafe in DFW, and the Cafe in LA, Los Angeles and California. So unless you could make it to those 3 places, you are not going to get a book. And they released it yesterday, June 15th, Saturday morning. They originally said they were going to release it Monday, but then they decided, or they were going to release it June 17th, but then they decided they were going to go ahead and push it out on the Saturday morning. I missed the update, and luckily Will locally told me that they were out and available, and so I drove over there, and there was almost 200 books stacked up on the shelf. It took up a whole end cap of just Into the Death Volume 3s.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, considering they are limiting it to 1 per person, so I think that's a good thing. I got one for myself, and I got one. A friend came with me, and so we picked up an extra one that we'll be doing a contest with for the podcast. We haven't figured it out yet, but since I kind of want to pass this on because I think it's really. I'll be honest. I don't like to curse this episode, but I think it's real shitty what GW did, and I honestly want to pass it on to people. So we'll figure out some way to give this away. If anybody has any recommendations for contests other than pick me, go ahead and send us an email to the show or PM one of us directly. But we're going to come up with some way to give that to a listener.
Sounds wonderful, and thank you again for picking that up for the show to do that. That really
cool.
I know there's someone out there who's greatly going to end up greatly appreciating that.
Yeah.
Well, shall we progress to the news, sir?
Sure. So the first thing, right after y'all recorded last week, we finally got the preview for the Necromunda broken terrain bit for ZM stuff.
That we did.
You get 6 wall sections, or you get 6 in-cap sections, 3 walls, 1 of each broken door, 1 gantry, which is not a lot, and a couple pipe walls in 1 box. That's it. And then they're also going to sell separately a data stack, which is actually kind of cool because it comes straight from Darktide, where you Ogrins move faster while carrying the data stack. I think these are really cool pieces of terrain, but like most of the ZM stuff, it's probably going to be a little prohibitively expensive to buy that broken wall set. I guess it'd probably be about $60 for those pieces. And that's, sadly, it's only about half of a normal wall set, since they are the broken bits. After that came up, this week's pre-order post, GW started mentioning the Merchoid / Starforged banner magnets. And so this is going to be, they look like the 10th Company banners for all the different legions. They're advertising the Blood Angels, Imperial Fist, Ultramarines, and Dark Angels. But these have been around for a while. I guess right now they're going to finally start coming to GW stores. I think they're like $15 a piece when I bought the Ultramarine one. They're pretty neat for, like, you know, if you just put it on your fridge or something like that. They're rimmed in like a gold, like a fake gold color, and so they really kind of pop on your fridge. The other non-GW release that we got was Starforged came out with a Blood Angel Red Grail necklace. And so this is a necklace that's a little bit bigger than a miniature Red Grail for a model, but the Red Grail sits in between a pair of paired Blood Angel droplets and wings. And so you can actually remove the Grail from the necklace itself and use it on a model if you wanted to spend
nice.
If you wanted to spend $265 to advance your model.
That might be a bit much, but that still sounds neat.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's getting pretty close to that's how much the models cost nowadays.
Yeah.
That's not entirely incorrect, Dan, because the other thing we got this week, GW dropped, obviously y'all talked about last episode, that all of the characters that we've been waiting for from Beta Garmin are now available for online-only pre-orders. And I bought Indrid Har a couple weeks ago when he was available, and I thought $58 was a little expensive, but Har's a big dude, and so I got him here, and he was, he's almost the size of a Terminator, so I didn't think it was that bad. Now, all of these characters are $58 for a single model, which means after tax and shipping, at least in Texas, you are going to be spending $75 for a single power armored model.
Okay, we all know Heresy is the niche of the niche of the niche of the niche.
Yeah.
And we all play it, and we all buy it. It seems that just like everything else these days, Heresy itself has become more expensive to play.
Yep.
And just even to collect. And I don't really begrudge that, because Lord knows this has never been a cheap hobby to get involved in. And I personally just spent $70 on a friggin' map. So I don't really have a lot of room to speak there. But sometimes some of this stuff seems to be a little top heavy.
Let's compare it to the same release on the same day. Mark 6 Legion Command Squad is $52 for 5 Marines and the Command Squad add-on kit. That is $6 cheaper than one single character for 5. and you get all the extra parts.
Yeah, but you don't have that special character that you know you're going to use in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about getting Hibu Khan for a conversion, but I can't swing that for a single model.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Little Horace is on his way to my house eventually. So is Tibble. So
I mean, I don't think it was that long ago when I bought Argo Tall, and I want to say Argo was that or maybe a little bit more, but not a whole lot different, right? And that's a really big model with wings and everything else that goes along with it. I mean, it's got a Marine in his hand and half
He's
on the base.
87.
Right? Well,
yeah,
but I don't think he was.
gone
I don't
up.
think he was when he released, though.
Okay.
No, he's
Yeah,
gone a bit up. I think
Yeah.
everything has gone up. They actually put out a slight price increase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
What,
we talked about-
April? We
Yeah,
think we
no,
talked about it.
it wasn't that long ago. We kind of mentioned it. It was a couple. I think it was the end of June, well, we are in June. I think it was the end of May or something like that. It was not that long ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, we all know price increases go up. As inflation goes up, prices go up, and everything else goes up. So it's not like we didn't expect to have to spend more. It's just something that people kind of have to pay attention to, including ourselves, because as the price of hobby goes up, you may or may not have less hobby dollars to spend.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't buy as many of those dudes. You know, it really changes your opinion of the individual models when they come out, right? You come out with a character model, and it's like, that'd be really cool to paint up and display or convert up, as John said, for something. And it's, I've spent $40, $35 for two characters from AOS that I was never going to use the models and just took a bunch of bits off of them, right?
Yeah.
It's a little much, but you can do it, right? But it 55, $60 for an individual model, that's just outside the price range to buy bits and do things with, right? And it's
Well,
especially when printers are so readily available, even if I don't have one, I can find people to print bits for me. So I don't know.
That's one thing I'm going to kind of touch on here. I think it would be not an unreasonable price in some ways if it was something that was also available in stores. Right
Well,
now, yeah, I'm just going to touch on that. I mean, if I could go down to my local Fligless and buy it for the Fligless prices, probably, okay, most places are going to give you 10% off of something, or you have a way to get 10% off of something.
Yeah, store credit, 10%, whatever, yeah.
Yeah, what have you. But my inability to do so, and then I got to throw another $10, $15 on top for shipping. Yeah, that's...
Well, and
even when you add tax on it, that's still kind of annoying. And it's starting to kind of price new players out in some ways.
And with the last books coming out and them changing that tact and not going mail order only and putting them in the local game stores, you kind of thought they were saying, well, we want Heresy to be out there and in stores and everything. And then they do mail order only on all the characters, right? And it's...
Yeah, so Heresy's supposed to be the third pillar of GW. I mean, you got regular 40K, you got AOS, and you got Heresy.
Yeah, which includes Legion Imperialis and the 28mm game pull.
And you see the base games there. You see a little bit of the expansions, like the vehicles, the dudes, and by that I mean squads. But you don't see things like this, which kind of...
Well, if it's plastic, it's in a store. If it's resin, it's not. I mean, that's just...
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it.
And why not, right?
I'd really like to see these available in the stores. That's just my commentary over. I think that would make it
that's a good point too, because not only can you not save 10%, but you're paying a premium to get it shipped.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You can get it shipped to GW stores and usually save a little bit on shipping, but the problem, you still got to pay tax and all that other stuff, and it wasn't so bad when GW offered free shipping for what was it, like 35 and over, which was basically a box. Now they don't offer free shipping at all, I think, until you hit 100 plus. So it definitely sucks, but Yeah, I don't know. I understand these are characters, so you're only going to ever have to buy one, therefore they should be more expensive. But I mean, if we think back to, usually what we kind of consider one of the best kits ever was that plastic Captain back in early 2000s.
Yeah.
I
I'll
mean,
be
he was the
honest.
cost of a box of Marines. He was $35 for a single model, and back then we all thought that was kind of expensive. But he came with the parts to build almost 8 Marines,
Yep. That said,
and these are
honestly,
single pose characters, not anything
I never
extra.
seem to buy the single post character just once. Whenever I grab a single post character, I always seem to grab 2 of them or more, just because I end up using bits and pieces off that second one for a whatever character, or just building something because I think it's kind of neat to build other guys out of these guys. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
and that's what I was doing early on with the generic Praetors for every legion, as I was converting a few of them into the knights, Malcador's knights, because I think they were really cool if you saved off a couple things. Excuse me, but yeah, they $58. Put it that way.
Yeah.
The other thing to mention is the fact that the command squad crew by itself is mail order only, while the Mark III and Mark VI command squads, which is just 5 Marines of whatever mark plus that sprue, are going to be in stores. And then the sprue by itself is $31.50. The complete squads are 52.
Did you say Mark 6?
Yeah.
Is it because the sprues are 3 and 3, so is it 6?
No, it's 5 Marines of Mark 6 or 5 Marines of Mark 3 plus the command squad sprue.
Oh, okay.
And then the command squad sprue comes with a new sheet of decals that has Sons of Horus, Fists, Salamanders, and Iron Warriors on it. Still only in black and white, which kind of sucks. But the Iron Warriors and the Fists have some new iconography on the sheet that I've kind of haven't seen before, except on their very large sheets. They've got some really nice Aquillas, and then some generic single-headed eagles, which I think is for like Terranborn and things like that. So there's some really cool stuff on there, and might be leaning towards some of the rumors we've heard of Salamanders versus Iron Warriors box set later.
Yeah. Yeah. Touching on that, talked with Chris Bergeron, our friend, the other day, who sometimes is on here with us. Okay, he's played Sons of Horus for a while. I've done Sons of Horus for a while at this point. And neither he nor I have ever seen one of the decals on there for the Sons of Horus set. So that's kind of weird. And then you brought up last night, I think it was, that one of the decals for, I think it was it Salamanders or
Fists.
who was it? Fists, that you hadn't seen before either. There was a new decal on that sheet. It just seemed kind of different. Maybe they're expanding the decals. I don't know. I really don't know.
And it's funny because the Iron Warriors have the double-headed Aquila in there, but I mean their sheet had that anyway, which I thought was always odd that they were, one of them were traitor ones, but always had the giant Aquillas on there.
Yeah, you're not wrong there either.
I do like the generic undersized skulls and laurel wreaths that are on the bottom of this sheet. They look like they'd be great for knee pads and shins and things like that. So anytime I get more fancy tiny decals, I always like it.
Oh yeah, I mean there's really no way to complain about it. And point blank here, I'm not complaining about the stuff that we're getting on those decal sheets. It just seems kind of different. So them expanding the decal style, cool. More bits and gubbins and iconography. I'm never going to complain about that.
Absolutely. That's really it. The only thing that's going to come up for pre-order next week is an Age of Sigmar plushie and those magnets. So we're kind of limited on the releases this week. Y'all were kind of pointing out in our chat though that we are really running out of room on the roadmap that we've got. The only thing left on there is the plastic melee weapons sprue that was supposed to be coming out in the spring. Uh, I'm in Texas. We don't have spring. It was a weekend, so supposedly that's coming soon.
I mean, we're in Kentucky. Jack and I are, and spring is a long time past here.
Yep.
So I don't know. Maybe they're counting the melee weapons from the upgrade kit. I don't know. I really don't.
I mean, here in Chicago, we get 3 seasons in a day, half the year. So, there's spring, summer, fall sometimes, or spring, winter, fall. It's just all over the place. So who knows?
Second winter.
Winter.
I saw a lot of people being upset about the Night Lords. There's a couple articles that were put out this week for Fluffwise. One of them was Solar Rock that had some really cool color schemes, and one of them was someone took the Command Squad sprue and combined it with a Mark 6 Assault Squad and made what I think is some pretty cool Night Lords. They're a little generic. There was a lot of people complaining on different Facebook groups that they didn't look Night Lordy enough. But I thought they were kind of neat.
I looked at them and I liked them. I had no complaints about them. They might be missing some of the gubbins, and they definitely are missing like some of the brutal stuff that the Night Lords are known and loved or hated for. But I thought they were pretty cool. I definitely didn't have a complaint.
Yeah, and there was a character at the bottom of the article that was made with that Blood Angel Destroyer Dominion Zaphon.
Yep.
Which I thought was really cool too.
Yeah, I like that. That was a really good kit bash they did on him. I'm definitely not going to complain. But then again, that just kind of proves my point from earlier of characters you acquire multiples of because, hey, maybe you want to build something else out of that named character other than that named character.
Yep.
Yeah, but that but that also
Zephon does sell in stores. So
but Zephon's also a plastic mob.
Yeah. So
I think, I may be jumping ahead, but one of the things that I'd like to see a lot more of is more plastic characters compared to resin character releases.
Well, that kind of brings us to the next topic. Right around this time, 2 years ago, Age of Darkness 2.0, Horus Heresy 2.0 became a thing. We got the basic box set that had been hyped up for months that we ourselves sat here discussing ad nauseum because we were all old Heresy hands at that point. And we discussed it, and we all said that we were looking forward to the changes. We were looking forward to new players coming in. We were looking forward to the different games that we would be playing, the changes and everything. And none of us quite knew what was coming down the pipe. We didn't know what was going to change other than some bits that they had teased to us. We knew reactions were coming. We knew that some weapons had different profiles. Some units obviously had different profiles. We knew that they were doing away with each of the generic units having a standard movement on them, and we had the new movement where everybody has different movements. And not to skip ahead of Dan's visit to Warhammer World, which I have done apparently, which is my bad, Dan. Sorry.
Man, we'll get to it later. It's all good.
Yeah. But Heresy 2.0 became a thing, and it's now 2 years later. And now 2 years later, it's in some ways what we expected. In some ways, it's not what we expected. It's an utterly different game than what Heresy 1.0 was. I think we can all agree on that. Does anyone disagree there?
Nope, agree.
No. Yeah, it's completely different. I think in some ways good, in some ways bad, which is what you gave us homework to do.
Yes, yeah, and I kind of came up with an idea that we can discuss once we get to that point. But here we are, two years into Heresy, and I'd kind of like for us to discuss our thoughts individually on what we think the state of Heresy is at this point. And I'm not going to hog the mic at this point. I'd like someone else to go first. So, John, Why don't you give us your thoughts on the
Sure.
current state of Heresy 2 years in?
I'll be honest with you. We have discussed it a little bit before that I think that the game has really split into Marine equivalent and non-Marine equivalent armies. In the fact that Solar Ox and Militia are really second fiddles, and it's not like a close second fiddle. It's a far second fiddle. Welcome, Ned. When you and I played, I think we had a great game where it was Solar Ox versus Solar Ox, and it was almost like a completely different game than any other Heresy game I'd played. Where I was usually running Armored Breakthrough or other things like that, where completely different types of missions. So there was just different ways of doing that. I think that what we're really looking at now in Heresy is kind of a limiting factor of we're missing some of the changes that we had before, both from a secondary, user added on units and rights to war and things like that, but also from GW themselves. Centurion was originally designed by Eye of Horus, but then GW picked it up and added that as a way to play the game, and y'all kind of discussed a little bit of that last week. But I think it's odd because I've heard it before in a couple other places that some people think that Heresy is about to hit 3.0.
I don't see how we possibly can at this point. We're not.
Yeah.
We're only 2 years in.
Yeah. That's GW though. It's make an edition and kind of fix it and then make another edition. Seems to be what they usually do. So I don't know. It's do you want me to go into what changes I would magic if I could magic?
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us. So the homework thing I came up with was each of us kind of give our own opinion of where we think Heresy is 2.0 at this point, what our thoughts are, and discuss what one rule we personally think could be added or changed or removed entirely, and what we think that would actually do to the scope and Heresy games going forward at this point, in a positive or negative way. So go ahead, John. Throw your change at us.
Mine is kind of a two-parter, so I apologize that I'm kind of breaking the rules. But I think reactions need to be limited to defensive weapons, and I think defensive weapons needs to be a class. So.
Okay, so how do you mean and why?
So I don't think that if you shoot a bolt pistol at a last cannon squad, they should be able to shoot 10 last cannons back at you. I think that certain weapons should be classified as defensive. Maybe not all heavy weapons, and this would kind of require a lot more thinking on balancing and things like that. But I think that certain heavy weapons, if you look at battlefield rules now, are designed more as kind of defensive weapons, as far as like preventing assault, things like that. Flamethrowers obviously would be designed as a kind of a defensive weapon. Maybe not a heavy bolter when it's carried by an infantryman. Maybe a heavy bolter on a tank or a sponson or a cupola weapon could be classed as a defensive weapon. I think it's weird that a multi-melta that's on a cupola, which cupola weapons are usually designed to be defensive, you can't shoot it back in a reaction. So I would almost have defensive weapons, or I would have reactions being limited to defensive weapons, but defensive weapons themselves being a class of weapon instead of just a generic strength check.
Okay, so you would basically take away remove the ability to react with like last cannons, auto cannons, missile launchers, anything below a certain strength, or anything above a certain strength.
Unless it's on a specific tank mount. Like you could buy a missile launcher defensively.
Okay, so like so as you used the example multi-melta, you would say grabbing for the cupola, the multi-melta would turn that into would grant that the defensive weapon rule.
Yep.
Okay. That doesn't make a lot of. I mean, that doesn't sound unreasonable at all. That actually sounds reasonable. Now, we do have our friend here, Ned, who came on from the Aneptis Astartes cast. Hello, Ned. You're
Hey guys.
here semi occasionally.
Yeah,
So
it's been a while,
so you're also in the channel where I proposed this for
Yes.
tonight. So, what thing are you, or would you care to rebut John's comment, his change? And if so,
No,
what
I
change
like.
would you make?
I think that there are definitely problems with reactions. I think that the shooting reactions in particular have a really big impact on the game in a way that isn't necessarily beneficial. I've just seen some people say that reactions entirely need to go, and I strongly disagree with that. I think reactions as a concept are one of the coolest ideas they've had for changing the game to make it more interactive. I do think that something needs to be done, and some of the things that I've thought about would be to make reactions shoot at a lower ballistic skill. Definitely hard cap the number of times that a unit can react in a turn, no matter what. So I don't like the idea of a single las cannon heavy support team reacting in the shooting, in the movement, the shooting, and the assault phase. Potentially also, I like John's idea about limiting it in that way as well. However, I think if you made it so a squad can only react once a turn, no matter what, I wouldn't feel as bad about a las cannon shooting back at a tactical squad, because I know it can only destroy one thing as opposed to potentially destroying three things.
Okay.
But largely, I also think that we have a problem with vehicles in this edition and vehicle squadrons. I think they're too weak. I think they don't do enough damage for the points we spend on them. Theoretically, the points we spend on them is pure with their survivability, but they're not very survivable. So I think vehicles need a look. Maybe vehicle squadrons or just vehicle pricing altogether.
So I kind of think I'll go ahead and throw my change, if you don't mind me taking a little bit of lead there. So, kind of cutting in there. My opinion of Heresy as it sits is it's a very different game than 1.0. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's a very different game than what we used to be used to. The changes to the weapon skill chart, the changes to the way the game plays, the reactions, the lack of the black books coming out every 2 or 3 years and having everything kind of jump out at once, I think all is a good thing. I do wish we saw more variety in armies configuration. I agree with John about the whole. There's not a lot of solar rocks out there. You don't really see a lot of them, and honestly, you don't see a lot of Mechanicum or Knight players. But maybe with the new changes to plastics for the solar rocks and the coming changes to plastics for Mechanicum, we will see more of those players in the future. And yes, I think balance change needs to be made there. Frankly, I do think that we do need an additional FAQ at this point, updating stuff. But I'm not going to harp about FAQ for what I personally would like to be changed. I think right now Heresy is in a pretty good spot. I'd like to see more releases, yes, but I think overall that Heresy is in a current spot where I would call it a B+. It's a good game. It's got good core, and we can build on that either through GW or through the community doing stuff as well. And I think it's got a lot of good player engagement and in the game that you play and in the community. I'd like to see it more in stores as the third pillar of GW's kind of triangle of business, but that's on them. Regarding the one rule change I personally would make, and it's not a thing of we need facts every 3 months, 6 months, whatever, no matter how much I would like to see that. But what I'd like to see is I'd like to see the removal of Sunder from all last cannon types. Gravis, non-Gravis, every single last cannon I think needs to have Sunder removed. And the reason I say that is because with that being removed, you make vehicles on the table more viable. You see players bringing more vehicles to a game. You see Armored Spearhead more often than you do, and it being something that can actually survive for longer and be functional on the table. Yes, I know Sunder has its place, and I could easily ask for that to be removed as a whole, but I don't think so. I think if you remove it just from the last cannons only, where it was added this edition. I think you will see more people bring different types of heavy support squads, different heavy support squads with different weapons, and that combined with the increase in vehicles that you would see on the table, I think would be a positive net overall for the game as a whole. So that's me. Ned, you had some thoughts.
I did. I like that a lot, actually, for a couple of reasons. One of them being the fact, mostly what you just last said, which was the variety of needing new anti-tank weapons, being able to focus more on multi-meltas. One of the things that's great about that is that multi-meltas only have a 24-inch range, so you're no longer being an absolute terrorist threatening every deep strike that comes in. You can't necessarily return fire constantly all over the place. I mean, the problem with the heavy last cannon or the last cannon team is that it's the universal kill threat, and so there's no point in thinking about taking something else. It's an auto include for a lot of situations, especially if you have friends who like to build tough lists, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it would definitely do a lot for variety in a lot of different ways. I think that's an elegant way to fix what is otherwise a really complicated and messy problem.
Thank you. I appreciate you enjoying my fix. Jack, what are your thoughts on Heresy at this state?
I think we are in a decent space overall in Heresy. Listening to some of y'all's comments about what you would like done, I think the whole entire reaction thing can be summed up in we have taken a you go then I go game and tried to make it more interactive. So with that, either A, we need to go all in on an interactivity, or B, like you all have suggested, really look into how much interactivity there can be in a given turn. Because until that basic core concept is handled, reactions and anything that we've add on to this base game is going to be very hard to get the balance on it correctly. I'm not for it. I'm not against it. That's just from a game design standpoint of we're shoehorning in stuff that the base rules weren't initially thought for. Changing one thing, like I'm sure there's a million things that people would love to hear in there. Duncan, you said about getting rid of Sunder for everything. I would personally rather them take vehicle units, squadrons, and you buy them as a squadron, but after the game starts, they act independently, and they're all kill points after that, like dreadnoughts are. Because I
make them a Talon as opposed to squadroning them up.
Yeah, I really like the Sunder because the number of times that I've shot a las cannon over the course of my whole entire gaming career, and it does nothing, and I just want to sit there and beat my head into the wall because it was like, well, here's this one shot and it does nothing. It's just frustrating. But I would personally love to be able to buy a squadron of Predators, deploy them as one group, and then turn one goes up the middle, one goes up the left, one goes up the right, and not have to worry about anything. Because for me, the squadron rules has never made any sense. Again, the actuality of it is that was a mechanism added onto a game system that wasn't designed to have that added on.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Squadrons kind of came in 4th edition, was it right?
No, I think they actually came in 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
Up to that point, you'd have single Predators and stuff like that.
I remember Squadron. I had the Squadron in my Leon Russ tanks back in 5th edition when I played the parking lot. I wasn't certain if they played that way in 4th because I don't remember 4th very well at all.
I remember Leaf Blower Guard had Squadrons, but I think that was 5th or 6th.
Yeah, that was 5th.
Yeah, I think I think that third and fourth had them only for militia imperial armies. Had
Like
some sort of
IG.
squadroning, and IG and Marines didn't, because it wasn't a vehicle as vehicle heavy in the rest of the list, but Guard was, and then in order to allow them to buy all the things and all of the slots the same way, with the points being so cheap for dudes, I think they had some sort of early rules of squadroning, but I think it was only for the Guard lists.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. It's been a long time, but it seems almost like it was. But yeah, it definitely, is
I
something that
do
was
hate,
added and expanded upon for sure.
yeah, I do hate, to Jack's point, like my armored spearhead, if I get charged by 5 Marines, I lose 3 Predators because that makes sense. When
Yeah, I
they're like
agree
8
there.
inches apart.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
remember
don't.
that game you and I had where that literally was how I was killing predators, was charging one and then bleeding through so many damn wounds or hits and penetrations.
I have a
The
different
crack
rule about
grenades.
vehicles, but I'm all for the buying them the same way you do dreadnoughts, and then putting them on the table and letting them do their own thing. So
Yeah.
sounds like that's a good one, Jack.
The crack grenades are another thing that's just it's an unbelievably challenging thing for tanks because it's so easy to kill them in melee now that
Yeah.
making them stand together and making it so easy just to blast through them is wild how soft they are.
It almost
Yeah.
seems like you could add the ability for, just going back to my defensive thing, like you could add like the defensive weapon shoots and like a cupola shoots into combat or something to give them the ability to not just, oh, I've been charged, I guess I'll pack up my tanks and go home.
I think you could do a lot to tanks and they would still not be broken in this edition. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I've not taken much time to think on it myself. I just have kind of minimized the use of them, which is fine because I don't always like to use a lot of tanks, but it's one of the things that makes my Iron Hands list fun to play, but also I lose a lot.
So I know I'm maybe jump out of turn on, but since I had an
Jump
idea
in, John, or jump in, Dan. It's your turn.
that was around, so I'll go with my vehicle tanks rule suggestion first, and then jump into the state of the game thing because it's
Okay.
relevant to what we're talking about. So my thought is that it's way too easy to blow up a vehicle in one shot. And so my rule would be that if you get to the point on the damage table right now where you would blow up a vehicle, you don't blow up a vehicle. You have a secondary damage table. You roll a d6. On a 1, it does an extra hit point. 2 to 5, it does an extra 1d3 hit points maybe. And then another 6 is the blow up. So instead of the single damage roll being the blow up, you get to another table where you're doing more, but doing more is only hit points unless you get another 6 out of there. And it takes that chance of, it gives the vehicles a little more survivability. For the points cost, gets them the ability to do more things for the point cost. It's a D6 mechanic that you can easily build into things. I think it does a little bit. Well, it doesn't really, because Sunder's just an armor roll, not the damage roll, right? But I think it's a very easy mechanic you could build in that you just bump to another chart if you get to the point where right now where you blow up a vehicle, and instead of blowing it up, you roll and do more wounds to it, and it just makes vehicles a lot more survivable with a very easy change to the rules.
Considering the average vehicle has an average, what, 3 hull points? Am I right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I give or take, yeah.
I could see something like that. I think I would make a slightly different suggestion if that would be making vehicles more survivable. If I were to make a suggestion in that route, and that would be to give vehicles, in essence, an invulnerable save. Give every tank an invulnerable save. And just have that to represent the fact that they are thickly armored, and whatever it is that you did to them bounced off the armor. It's sloped armor, or they got flickered away by the hollow field, and just basically make it a universal 5, if that would make any sense.
I'm going to say something little sacrilegious here,
Oh,
but
go ahead.
the one of the things that I didn't hate to some extent about 8th edition 40K when it came out was going to toughness and hit points on vehicles and um, just giving them a whole bunch more hit points and then adding in the mechanic of, you know, levels of damage reducing the viability of the vehicle as opposed to um, the way it works where a vehicle's good, and then not good. I don't know. It would take some work to try and fit it in with the current rule set because I wouldn't want to go to completely everything like eighth because there was a lot of ridiculousness that I didn't like. But I didn't hate that, and maybe the implementation wasn't perfect, and I don't know, but that's an option too, right? All of a sudden your Land Raider has a you know toughness 8 with 16 or 18 wounds or something like that. But then if it gets down to 6, then it doesn't move as far and can't shoot as many weapons or something, right? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not really sure I like that. I like the armor.
It'd be a lot of work to make it work, right? Anyway.
Yeah, it would.
When I was playing 8th edition, much more, the biggest not problem, but I'll say that the obvious shift there then becomes like how much damage a weapon does is what matters. And so, like, for example, then you get into an arms race with damage type of a different kind. So like las cannons did D6 damage in 8th edition, and probably still 9th. I really don't know. I haven't paid attention. But because D6 was so swingy, people preferred things that were like flat 3, or flat 2. And so then it became like everything was an autocannon meta to kill tanks or anything else. Which
everything's Thunderhammer meta now, right?
Right. I get it. I'm just saying, like, you might end up, you would have to redesign everything in mind with like that same sort of situation. And I don't know.
For sure.
It would be an entire rehaul of everything, and that's probably why I don't imagine that's the route they'll go on.
Well, and when someone threw out Heresy 3.0 and rumors of it, we talk about reactions and all that. My hope is that if and when we go to 3.0, it is a completely different modern style game, and it's you take a turn for a unit, an action, I take a turn, instead of me doing all of my things and then you doing all of your things. And, go to that Necromunda style alternative activation as opposed to your turn, my turn for the whole army game style. And again, that's a completely different game. But it takes all of the complaints about reactions and it just throws it out the window because if you have reactions, it's just built into that back and forth mechanic anyway. Now, I will say, we've had reactions since I started playing 40K, which was late 2nd edition, but reactions were Overwatch. And in order to use an Overwatch, you had to take an action on your turn to go into Overwatch. And then you got to shoot on the opposing turn when someone did something. And I think that's the biggest problem with the current implementation is, like you say, I can shoot on my turn, then I can Overwatch and shoot in all the opposing phases based on my reactions. And then I still get my action on the next turn too, right? So there's just too much actions, and it makes things like the las cannon units even more powerful than they would be if there was more of a limit to it.
Yeah, I agree. That there feels like no risk. and
There's
having
no
to
risk
prepare
in
for
not
that.
taking a last cannon squad.
Yes.
It's just there's too much reward and no risk whatsoever in having it. It's just the ubiquitous unit at this point that we see almost everywhere.
I also want to point out that the Talons idea for vehicles, which is a great idea, right? It's another example of a solution to a problem, which is basically the thing that Dreadnoughts already get to do, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So jumping back to since I jumped into my rules before my overall state of the game, I think that the game, like you said, the game is different than Heresy 1.0 was. I think it probably is better than Heresy 1.0 was if you use the rules that were published in the red and the black books. It probably is a little bit behind where Heresy 1.0 was, with implementation of some of the Mournival rules, basically the facts and updates and not the new units. I think there were some balance issues with some of their units. Um, Although some of the things that seemed like balance issues ended up getting implemented in 2.0, so it's an interesting thought in my mind, but still the case. I would say, in that B range, B to B plus. There's definitely, with the FAQs and some of the things they've done, some rebalancing that could be done, especially I think with the legacy units. That whole set of PDFs probably need to be looked at. I've not gotten to play much at all of the Marine versus non-Marine to understand what the differences are or why it's problematic. But I've heard more than just us podcasters talk about there being issues with that. So there's probably something that needs to be done there, and I don't know if it's purely a balance thing or if it's just an overall rule interaction thing. But what I will say, and this is, to me, and this is probably something that I think we all agree with, whether we've said it or not, the game of Heresy is cursory to my enjoyment of Heresy, whereas the community of Heresy is number one. And I think the community of Horus Heresy players is stronger than it was at the end of 1.0. I think, we continually see um, more events, expanding events, more small game store events showing up around the country, filling up all of the major events, and just lots and lots of cool people. And I'll say people, not just cool dudes, because there were a number of non-dude Heresy players at Adepticon this year,
Yep.
not just one, and with some really cool armies and won some prizes for army. I don't remember if it was appearance or composition or whatever Lucas's rules were for Firex, but I think the community is definitely still the A+ wargaming community out there. A little bit in spite of the game, but because of what the basics of it are and what the models are. So
Yeah, there's definitely no complaint whatsoever about the community. It's an amazing community. Coming into it, you just meet some seriously cool people, and
me, but
it's
that's okay.
and us. But it's just this is our home. We love our home. Okay, Jamie has arrived.
What's
So
up, Jamie?
Jamie, what do you feel is the state of Heresy 2.0 at this point? And as we said earlier, what's the one rule you personally feel you would change, and why?
Well, it sounds like, because I'm just stepping into it, y'all have already kind of talked about it, but my big deal is I think reactions are way too powerful. Either I'd like to get either rid of them or like limit it to like once per game per side. I just think they're just too powerful, especially with as y'all have kind of already elaborated. Like it's turned some units like Last Cannon teams into like super snipers essentially, and yeah, I mean you had Overwatch and the older versions of Heresy, but you lost. You know, it was more. It wasn't necessarily like a given thing that you were gonna do well in the shooting part of it. But anyways, I think Heresy is actually doing pretty well. It seems like it, at least here in the Southeast, a lot of people are kind of gravitating to it, mainly because they're just kind of frustrated with the way 40K has kind of gotten to, and for another thing for like Age of Sigmar. I know my area, there's a lot of Age of Sigmar players, or there were Age of Sigmar players. They're just very frustrated with the constant turnover of the rules very quickly, and the the proverbial codex creep, I guess you would call it. They just, you can't, if you stick with an army, even though they've been doing better balancing stuff, like some armies are still horrible and almost unplayable, and then others are still top tier, and they won't drop even with the balancing stuff they've done. So they're just kind of frustrated with it, and they see that Heresy seems to be a lot more stable. The rules aren't as in flux, let's say. Even though we do get facts and get new units added to it, it's not as codex creepy. It's not like everything that's added as soon as it's added is like a must-have unit. Whereas, I mean, I know with Solar Ox, there's stuff in it that's we've talked about. There's like stuff that was added that we're just like, why? And like, how do you use it?
Yeah.
So at least from what I've seen in the Southeast, I think Heresy is doing very well. And I mean, like, from Adepticon, like it seems to be growing even at Adepticon very well too, year after year. It's been 2 years out since they released and 2.0, and it seems to still be growing. I mean, at least, this year, it definitely, I mean, if we had more space, there's probably been more players.
Yeah, I agree there.
Not to say it would have, like, if they doubled the size, they would have filled it, but there was definitely more people that wanted to play that some people did not get to play because they just couldn't fit it in, or they got discouraged when they didn't get the initial offering of a spot for any of the events, because the Heresy events sold out, and there was like 40K events that never sold out, and there was definitely Age of Sigmar stuff that never even got half of the spots filled. So, I think it's in a good spot at where we're at. I mean, are there problems? Yes, there's problems with every game. No game's perfect. But yeah, I think we're in a good spot. I mean, like, we all want stuff. We want to see more new stuff, and we'd like to see maybe some FAQs and stuff like that. But that's, I think we're in a good spot. I really do. So yeah. Is there anything else that I missed?
Just talking about the releases and such.
The rule. Then have we gone over the stuff we'd like to see? You said that like there's one rule change we'd like to see, and then
the one rule change is kind of included in the whole state of heresy at this point.
Okay.
So you would suggest, what is your one rule change you would suggest?
Well, mine was not necessarily a rule change. Is to do a new mini or black book rules.
No, this is rules. One rule you can add, change, or remove.
Well, I already said it was Overwatch. I mean, not Overwatch reactions. I just get rid of it, or like one per side per game.
Okay.
Make it so that like it's something special. Like say like you don't get to get it every time somebody does something, basically. And I'm not saying that you do but you get at least one. Usually, you will at least get one a turn. So it doesn't seem like it's that special anymore.
Okay.
Can I ask a question to go back to something that was said earlier?
Certainly.
Thank you. We were talking a little bit about the variety of armies and seeing mech and seeing knights and Solar Rock, or not seeing them specifically. And I guess I had two questions to go along with that. One is that, do you think you're seeing less of them this edition than you did first edition? The reason I ask is because, and maybe my experience was different because I didn't do a lot of conventions in first edition, and I only knew one mech player in first edition, and I didn't play them often. But the reputation they had was just extremely unfriendly, just like a brutal army to play against, and so that was part of what drove people away from them in my circle.
So you're talking like AdMech, right?
Yeah.
From the events that I went to, I wouldn't necessarily. I'd say yes, you did see. I think you used to see more in 1.0. You used to see more AdMech. Now, I would also say you probably used to see more knights as well.
You did. I'll be honest, Solar Rocks, you never really saw that often.
No, like 1.0, unless you had
saw more militia than Solar Rocks.
Yeah. You had
John was one of the few people I ever saw ever play anything other than mech or power armor or knights.
So if in first edition part of the reason, like let's say that, because my impression as well is that a lot of those armies were pretty effective against Marines in certain ways. In this edition, the general perception is that they're not as good. So yeah, sure, maybe they're showing up now because they're not as good. Is that necessarily bad for the game? Now, I'll admit, as somebody who's been playing Solar Ox, it feels like I have essentially like one or two things that I can do to play against Marines, and I have to hope they go well, or I'm just kind of sunk, which is not necessarily great for my personal experience. But is that worse for the game if the game is supposed to be keyed around Marines? And that's just a hypothetical entirely.
Good question.
So, can I expand on that a little bit, Duncan?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the previous editions, it was specifically with militia, it was a lot easier for them to fight Marines because artillery was better. And that kind of goes into one of the guys in our chat, Brian. He sometimes co-host. His thing was going to be fixed artillery, and I don't necessarily think that was the only reason that militia was played more. The other thing is all of their other, specifically anti-tank weapons, were a lot cheaper. I know, he's got a bit of a bad rap, but Macca has gone through. Macca, the Outer Circle, has gone through and talked a lot about the militia anti-tank weapon pricing is oftentimes more expensive than Marine equivalent guns.
Yeah, I'll agree there.
Worse ballistic skill, lower toughness, lower leadership, etc., etc., etc.
And more expensive.
Yeah. And so that's where you're running into a lot of problems there. In the previous editions, it was easier for them to spam heavy weapons. I mean, I didn't go with the crazy fearless cultists that were great in combat, backed up by completely unbelievable waves of infantry. I went more for two giant blobs that were just going to tie you up, and then artillery that would soften up whatever the blobs weren't going after. And it was beatable if you just shot at the artillery or pinned the blobs with a couple of tests. So I think before it was that militia were a decent tier army, but like you're kind of alluding to, they weren't as popular as Marines, obviously, because this is a more Marine-centered game. And therefore, some people were coming into those games going, man, how do I beat this? And then would sometimes do the wrong thing. Now, though, what you end up with is, like you were saying, there's only like maybe 2 or 3 ways to build a list that will work, period, to fight Marines. And if the Marine player knows that that's the thing that I need to concentrate on, you're probably not going to win. Now, winning isn't obviously the most important thing, but I like to be able to have a fighting chance.
So I'm going to throw a different take in here a little bit, and it has to do with releases and pulling new players in and the ease of getting into Heresy right now, I think you see as many number wise of those other armies at events, but they're a smaller percentage because as the events are growing, a lot of the new people that are getting into it are getting in with all of the box sets and the kind of Marines are the easy way to get into Heresy right now, right? You can buy so much stuff in plastic, and
So
and I think that there's just I don't think it's that people aren't buying Solar Ox and aren't buying militia armies. People, it's just so easy to buy Heresy armies and get it, or Marine armies and get into Heresy on the Marine side, that I think that's more driving why percentage wise you're seeing less of the non-Marine armies in and less so about power on the battlefield, right? I really do. I think the
You say it's
long
more
term,
about availability?
yeah, more about availability. They did the one box set that had some malicious stuff in it, right? I think, but the fact is that if I want to go out and get an army, I'll go and buy a Marine box, right? Starter set, and I got a bunch of Marines, and I split it with someone, and we're talking about there's a rumor of another one coming out, right? I think it's just the ease of getting into the game means as we grow, the percentage of those alternate armies isn't growing at the same rate that the Marine armies are. And it might
Without
be
a
a little bit
doubt,
of both, but
yeah, without a doubt, this is an interesting conversation to come back to in like 6 months after,
I agree.
Solar Ox are out for like 8 months, and then after we see Militia, or Mechanicum come out. But one of the strongest builds from Mechanicum involves the Myrmidons, and those have not yet, I think, been previewed as being in plastic. So it'll be interesting to see what people think of Mechanicum when they get those out, and they can't necessarily do what they, think they need to do because they don't have the models that they need for that.
I agree. I think that a big thing about that's just going to be availability.
Yeah.
And as we get more stuff available, I think we would actually see more people playing a wider variety of armies at events.
Yeah.
We got
No.
that talk again.
No, I will say that I think that Knights, because Knights are easily available, right? You could buy almost or a vast bulk of the Knights you'd want to play in plastic, and you still aren't seeing them. I think there's something there that the Knights are, went from being not allowing most armies to have agency against them to where they're almost too easy to take out and don't have quite enough stuff to hold their own. But the interesting thing is, and maybe I missed it, but I saw a lot less Custodes at
I would say
events.
at the big events, yes, but what I'm seeing down here at the events here in Alabama and Tennessee and northern Florida and stuff and Georgia is that the players that are crossing over are trying to port their knight armies and their custodes armies.
That's fair.
And instead of trying to start a new army of Marines or Solar Ox or Mechanica or whatever, they're trying to start with one of those armies. And what they're finding is that, like, people don't want to play them, especially if they're custodes. Especially if you're a custodes player running a Warhound Titan with them. For some reason, people just don't want to play that when they play Heresy. And the more established or players that have been playing a while try to explain to these players. They're like, look, first of all, most of your custodes army doesn't work in Heresy, and then second thing is custodes are generally not seen favorably because they're very overpowered, and they're not considered what you call a friendly beer and pretzels type game. So we've tried to steer players to other armies, but it's tough when they're crossing over from 40K into Heresy. So
there's something sadly I'm sorry, Jamie. Finish up.
No, I'm sorry. But that's what it's gonna. Basically, that's where I've been seeing a lot of those two armies specifically because they're bringing them over from 40K.
I was gonna say there's something sadly tragic about people trying to leave 40K and save money doing so.
Yeah, I know.
Getting told they're not doing it right, and I mean, I'm not saying you're saying that they're not doing it right, but explaining to them why it's not working.
No, we've tried, and like we're not being mean about it. We're just like, okay, look, you're stepping into a new game system. Yes, it looks similar and
Good
it has
for you.
some similar minis, but here's a big but: it's not the same game, you know. So. And they get it. Nobody's been like offended, like when we've kind of sat them down after a game or something like that and said, "Hey, this is what's going on. This is why your opponent really didn't have a good time or whatever playing with you, and this is why."
How bad are Custodes now compared to like the end of 1.0? Are they closer to being competitive with the Standard Marine list, or are they still just head and shoulders better?
They're easy to build, insanely good. So if you just spam the normal Custodes, you have a really good list. If you take a Terran Guard, period, they can almost solo armies by themselves. But on the other hand, if you go with a lot of vehicles, or if you go with taking transports at all, it becomes almost a really easy to beat army.
Okay.
That's interesting.
It's really weird. The Custodes it's almost like if you play them fluff wise, where they're just standing on the wall, you're just gonna tip people over. But if you play them like you did in 1.0, which is kind of a combination of things and trying to do it a little different, and the dreadnoughts are they're dreadnoughts, which is good, but they're a little overcosted for what they are. It's just funny that you could either build something that's amazing or something that's almost unplayable wise with the same list.
It's funny because like I always one of the things I used to always look at and argue with folks, or not argue but point out to folks, was their Leviathan equivalent that basically had, I don't know, 2 or 3 stat bumps and 2 or 3 extra powers from a Standard Marine Leviathan, and was either the same price or 5 points more or something like that. Yeah. So, in 1.0, they, I think the general consensus is that if you took a 25% point penalty, you were about even. And so I that means they're, a fourth better than a Standard Marine army or more, right? I just wondered where they fit now, because I haven't seen them, right? I've not played them. I haven't really seen them at event. Thinking about walking around at Adepticon, I don't remember seeing.
So if you play them
full, I think I saw an Allied detachment at one, but I didn't see a full Custodes list that I saw.
So if you play full Custodes, they kind of, I don't know, as like John said, they're kind of, they can be oppressive. But like if you have them allied with the sisters, like how they probably should be played,
right?
They're not as brutal or oppressive playing. They kind of tone them down a bit, but they're more balanced in that way too.
Yeah.
I think at Adepticon I only saw one Custodes unit with like some sisters too.
Yeah.
And I think that was in one of Lucas's games. And then on the other side, I think I only saw one Custode army on one of the events, and that's saying. I mean, that's a lot. I think I saw more knights than I did them. So, which there weren't many knight armies this year.
I think that we will see more people playing Solar Ox and Mechanicum going forward. Once again, touching back to what we all had mentioned during the very beginning, as more stuff becomes regularly available through the regular friendly locals and the individual Warhammer stores, once people see stuff that they want to play on the shelves, I think they're more likely to grab it and be able to play it. And I think that will see an increase in Solar Ox, Militia, and Mech. And I think I don't believe they'll ever come quite to parity or even close to parity with how many times you see Marines in Heresy, but I think we will get a lot closer to parity if that makes sense.
Oh, I think there's another reason you won't see them ever get to parity, and that's, what was the release this week? It's 4 unique characters, right?
Yeah, and that's a
part,
big thing.
Part of what draws people to the Heresy lore and novels are the characters, and there just are not anywhere near as many strong and interesting characters from the non-Marine side, because it's about a Marine on Marine civil
It's
war.
the Heresy. The Marines are the stars.
And so I think, I think that there will always be a lesser amount of all those alternative armies. There always will be, because there's people that think it's cool and, want to bring armies over from from 40K or right. There's lots of reasons people want to play those alternate armies, but I think ultimately the vast majority of people that are building lists are building them around the lore from the novels, and there's just more strong characters and more you relate more to the Marine Army lists than everything else.
I have been working on a video just to discuss the different Solar Ox cohorts idea from the most recent rulebook, the Beta Garmin one. And I think that's a great thing that they can continue to do. Find a way to utilize allied detachments as a way to get some of these things in. It'll obviously push sales, which is good, but also it's just a cool way of providing a different flavor and variety, and also including just something that looks more interesting on the field for a lot of different people to play with. And the rules are not bad for several of them. They're good, and they're complementary rules, which is again fun. One of the things that I like is that a lot of them seem to be still making sure that the Marines are what shine in the list, but the Ox gets to make the flavor feel better, and they're definitely serving that, a rule purpose, and they can still have a narrative purpose in your own thing that you're doing for them.
Yeah, I can see that. I look forward to hearing that episode from you, Ned.
Yeah, it'll come soon, TM.
Yeah. I also look forward to hearing Erebus in your next episode again.
Dude, we've been
That's the only time I ever like hearing Erebus.
He's anxious he's got something to talk to you about, so.
Oh Lord.
Do you hear Erebus other times?
Yes, whenever I'm listening to one of the audiobooks, because he pops up with annoying frequency.
I was just wondering if maybe you had random Erebus voices in your head or something.
No, there are
nightmares.
I do not have random Erebus in my head. Thank goodness.
That's a good thing. Note to all listeners: if you ever get random Erebus talking to you in your head, seek some assistance from a professional.
Especially if it lasts more than 4 hours.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes, if your Erebus lasts for longer than 4 hours, go to a medical professional. But we do kind of need to touch on the new exemplary battle tonight.
Okay, we got a new exemplary battle this week. It has Sanguinary Guard for Blood Angels. It's awesome. Sorry.
Well done, Dan. Thank you. Dan's review is awesome.
But anyway, that was a nice, well, I guess not really surprise, because they had previewed that it was coming in the Sunday release.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't know what it was specifically. You just knew one was coming.
Yeah, we didn't know who it was for.
Let me see.
But given the release of the Command Squad stuff,
I think Jacob had probably the best review of the unit. Very whelming.
Yes,
over or under. He's just whelming.
Yeah,
yep.
It's a good.
So I think something's very interesting that that is missed here, and admittedly, right? So they timed it with the release of the Command Squad bits, and they published whose list did they feature? Was it Andy Wardle's?
No, Henry. Was it Henry?
Henry.
Yeah.
From Cult of Pain, right?
Yep.
So which is all converted and all that sort of stuff. But the one thing that this does is they've got all of their cool plastic, smaller scale marine units. And in 40K, everything is moving to Primaris, and there's not going to be a need for things like the plastic Sanguinary Guard model. And whether you are going to use that kit for building this Sanguinary Guard squad or supplementing other cool things for Blood Angel conversions, that's an amazing kit. And I hope to God that this means that because of this exemplary battle release, they're going to keep that and maybe do a rebox, a repackaging, and continue to sell that kit, because it would suck for that kit to go away. As a Blood Angels player, I have used bodies for different things, weapons for different things. It's just there's so much you could do with that Sanguinary Guard box, even if it's not just building the Sanguinary Guard squad. So that's one of the things that I think is really hopefully good about this.
Not just that, they're with 40K, they're moving away from, as quote unquote, the firstborns. So you have a bunch of Legion specific boxes like that Sanguinary Guard unit, like for both the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves, that are going to end up going away too. So,
yep.
Chances
are
maybe
they start.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say maybe we start seeing more things like scouring and other historical 40K historical rule sets based around Heresy 2.0, which we've kind of always wondered if it might be the way they were going anyway.
One thing that this gives me hope on, before we even read the rules on them, is this is the first exemplary battle that releases an exemplary unit for a Legion that already has an exemplary unit.
True.
So this makes 2 exemplary units for the Blood Angels. This gives me hope that we're going to keep seeing more units like this come out for the other Legions, like the World Eaters, like the Sons of Horus, like the Salamanders. We'll see more variety of things coming out for them, and that gives me a lot of hope on that. Even before we think about them putting exemplary battles units into books like they did with us last year. Just hopefully we'll see more exemplary battles units going forward. And I'd like to see the exemplary battles expand and include stuff for Solar Ox, include stuff for Militia, Mech, everything. I think that would be a really nice way to continue with the expansion of the stuff they're already doing.
Is this the only one that doesn't include a mission in it thus far?
It does include a mission.
Oh, it does have a mission. I just didn't scroll down for it.
Yeah, you just got to keep going.
I was hoping I would scroll down and see somewhere where they, because it talks about the Night Lords.
I was hoping the same thing.
Oh, by the way, also Atramentara weapon skill 5. Just like one line, you know what I mean? Like that would have been pretty sweet. But alas.
You mean give us the unit that we've always wanted?
Yep.
Night Lords?
That's the one.
So you want me to jump in now that we've gone through all that? You want me to jump in and read the
have at it, Dan. You are the truly dedicated Blood Angel player here.
So they are 0-1 Sanguinary Guard squad at 210 points. That includes 5 dudes. Their stat line: movement 7, weapon skill 5, ballistic skill 4, strength toughness 4, 2 wounds, initiative 4, 2 attacks base, leadership 9, 2+ save. So that's war gear is bolt pistol, perdition weapon, artificer armor, hence the 2+ save, crack grenades, frag grenades, and Legion Warhawk jump pack. They are infantry type unit. They get special rules: Legion of Astartes, Blood Angels, Burning Ones, which is, I think, the new one. Is that the new one in here? Yeah, we'll get to that. Chosen Warriors, Support Squad, Sanguinary Guard Retinue, and Loyalist. You can take up to 5 more dudes at 40 points each. You can give all models melt-a-bombs for 25. For every 5 models in a unit, one may exchange its perdition weapon for a paragon blade at 10 points. So you can have, there's no sergeant, so basically you can have 1 or 2 paragon blades in there, depending on how many guys you buy. They may exchange their bolt pistol for hand flamer or volkite serpenta at 5 points each. Plasma pistol or the Inferno pistol at 10 points each. They get Sanguinary Guard Retinue. So Sanguinary Guard Squad may be selected as a Retinue Squad. An attachment includes the least model with both Master of Legion and Legion of Astartes Blood Angel special rules instead of an HQ choice. Unit with Retinue Squad must have 1 model and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, from the same detachment, blah, blah, blah. Does not use up a 4-sword chart and is considered part of the same unit as the model selected by its leader. May be deployed, the leader may not leave. 1 Sanguinary Guard Squad in that retinue may exchange their perdition weapon for a power weapon and Legion standard for 15 points. So that's kind of just your standard.
And that was a serious downgrade at this point.
Yeah, it's standard retinue squad, but yeah, the Legion standard isn't I don't other than cool modeling opportunities, I don't see why you do that.
Well, because it makes them have the ability to have a scoring unit.
It's selected as part of a detachment in an army that includes Sanguinius. All sanguinary, this is the Burning Ones rule, sorry. So if including an attachment with Sanguinius, all Sanguinary Guard gain +1 attack, while Sanguinius has 4 wounds or less. If Sanguinius is removed as a casualty, all Sanguinary Guard in that detachment gain an additional +1 attack. So that's their get more brutal when they think there's something going bad with Sanguinius. If selected as a part of a detachment that does not include Sanguinius, then all friendly units, including Sanguinary Guard units, that are locked in combat and have at least 1 model within 6 inches of 2 or more Sanguinary Guard models may add +1 to the total number of wounds caused for purpose of resolving each side as 1 combat. Does not stack with any other rules that increase the assault result. So, we had a lot of, I know the one chat we were going back and forth on whether these guys replace or serve the battlefield role of Dawnbreakers or the Ophinum or something else you would take as a retinue squad. They're definitely different. I probably will model them up as a retinue squad myself and plan on taking them with Sanguinius or Praetor, and still try and bring Dawnbreakers into the unit. I may still model up some Ophinum because I'm not crazy, but I see these as replacing the Ophinum in my list. The perdition weapons are there. The one is the hammer, which is a Wimpier Thunder Hammer. I forget, the axe is pretty good.
You get a sword, you get an axe, you get a spear, or a mace. The mace is +2 strength. Axe makes you strike last. Sword gives you no strength bonus and rending 6 up. And the spear gives you +1 strength and +1 initiative, but no rending. And all of them give you brutal. So, no, sorry, mace gives you +3 strength. My bad. I like the squad fluff-wise. I like the thoughts of the squad, and I see what you're talking about using them to replace your Ophanon. Between these, Ophanon and Dawnbreakers, I'm more of a fan of the Dawnbreakers, if that makes any sense.
So it looks like whoever built the unit that's in the exemplary battle itself used an axe and a sword from that box. The spear, I don't recognize where that spear is from. And the mace just looks like their plastic like Terminator mace, right?
So that spear looks kind of like Sanguinius' spear to me.
That would be like GW.
Nope.
I mean, it could be from AOS, for all I know.
It might be an AOS High Elf sphere, or something like that. Yeah. Same with that mace in the back. I'm not sure where that mace is from at all. That might be it then. That might be where that from, and maybe that spear's from one of their deep elves, the water guys. I don't know. I'm not big up on AOS stuff, honestly.
I'm not sure where that banner's from either, though.
So the decal on it is from the Blood Angel transfer sheet.
Yeah, no, I have that.
I think the top of that, I'm not sure where that eagle's from. I really don't know.
Wasn't there a character that had an eagle like that, or was that a third-party bit I'm thinking about?
I don't know, honestly. I really don't. Although, that could be the Cortez eagle. I'm not sure. I don't know. And I don't want to speculate.
But I think the banner itself might be like an AOS banner.
Maybe. Yeah, still, even when you come down to price, ignoring price on them, I'm just I know Jacob said he was whelmed on them. I'm personally underwhelmed because with all of them having perdition weapons, they all have 2 attacks base, 3 on the charge. You can't increase their attacks. For longer combats, they don't get more attacks because they're 2-handed weapons. And if you're going with 2-handed weapons and you need AP2 just for the brutal, I mean, just for the AP2 and the brutal part, it seems it really seems underwhelming, flat out, point blank.
No, well.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go with underwhelmed, honestly.
Okay.
I'm going to build a squad of them because I like them, and I think they're neat. But I don't really see myself using them that often. I really see myself using the Dawnbreakers more when I play the Blood Angels.
Yeah, I remember thinking that Perdition Blade was a really cool thing to include in a squad, but the attack number is it really hurts them.
It does. Even
but it's a cool enough unit that I'm glad it's there. You know what I mean? Cue the Marge Simpson meme. Well, I just think they're neat.
I just think they're neat.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, they are neat.
Yeah.
But hey, like I said, the biggest thing I like about them is that it hopefully gives me hope that we'll see more exemplary battles in the future for other legions again.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And I think at that point, gentlemen, we have discussed everything that was on the agenda other than what we're taking the next week. Am I right?
So
we are taking a break next week.
We are taking a break next week.
Yes.
All right. Well, Jack would be the authority on that.
Well, let me jump in here then and say to the Accountability Buddy listeners, Happy Father's Day for those of you who celebrate. That's when this was recorded. And Jack, being the madman that he is, will probably have it out before the end of Father's Day.
Do you want to know the funny thing about it right now?
Tell me, Jack.
I'm actually already editing it right now.
Yep, that's Jack for us.
Yeah.
You know, I messaged Jack on one of the nights you guys recently were recording, and I asked him, I was like, how in the heck are you editing so quickly? Like, what's your secret? And he's like, well, I just don't talk much, and I just make notes every time something happens that I know I'm going to need to edit out. And I said, okay, I'll try that on my next episode. I just won't talk. And we had a good laugh at that. But Jack, you're a machine.
You truly are, Jack. And yeah, happy Father's Day to all the listeners.
Yeah,
and the
happy
members
Father's
who are
Day.
dads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do I miss? I'm sorry.
Both of you are machines. You were busy editing. Don't worry about it.
My bad.
And with that, I will go ahead and say thank you, listeners, for beginning with us from this 86th episode of the Heresy Accountability Buddies podcast. We appreciate all your time you spent listening to us. And I hope everyone out there has had a good Father's Day, as was mentioned before. For the Heresy Accountability Buddies, I've been Duncan. In this episode, I've been joined by
Dan.
Jack.
Jamie.
and our special guest,
Ned.
Ned. That's where Ned would say Ned, but Ned can't say Ned. So
I said Ned. It's Ned.
okay, there we go. And remember, stay accountable to yourselves, stay accountable to your hobbies, stay accountable to your buddies, and we'll catch you next time.
There you go.
Like and subscribe, and see ya.